بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين صدق الله العظيم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulihil Kareem ala sahbihi ajma'een. My dear respected guests, ladies, gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum and the greetings of peace be upon you all. His partner that introduced my next speaker, he said, you know what, don't introduce me. Alhamdulillah, he's a public speaker, international level. MashaAllah, on Islam, he's a writer, lecturer, intellectual activist. He's very interested in Islam, politics, Western and Islamic philosophy. He's traveled the world extensively, most notably to the USA, Malaysia, Canada, and Lebanon. He's one of the main initiators of contemporary emergence of Muslim public debaters and speakers using Western and Islamic philosophy to defend and explain what Islam's all about. He's also head of IQRA research and lecturer at IQRA. So please welcome to Edinburgh. Please welcome Hamza Tzortzis.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Brothers and sisters and respected guests, I greet you with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Today I'm going to be talking about the remarkable Quran, the fact that we as Muslims believe we have very good reasons to verify and justify that this book, which we call the Quran, is from the divine. That we can't explain it naturalistically. It is best explained via the supernatural, which makes sense of God. So we believe humbly, but also with an assertion, an intellectual assertion, that the Quran is indeed the book of God, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way I want to discuss this, brothers and sisters, is basically talking about a few things. Number one, I'm going to talk about what is the Quran. Number two, I'm going to basically discuss that it makes you think, it engages with the inner dimensions of the human being, with his aql, in Arabic this is the intellect, with his nafs, with his internal psychological disposition. I'm going to talk about the intellectual challenge of the Quran, that the Quran is inimitable from a linguistic perspective. What does this mean? This means that it cannot be matched or emulated. I'm going to talk about its structure. It has a very unique, amazing structure. It was revealed over a 23-year period for specific times and places, but yet the Quran has an amazing coherence. We're going to talk about the implications of this. We're going to talk about lost knowledge, that there is lost knowledge that the Quran was talking about that was lost in the 7th century, yet the Quran gives us this knowledge which indicates it cannot have come from a human being. We're also going to talk about that the Quran is very multi-layered and multi-leveled. What does this mean? It means that when the Quran uses a particular word for nature, for natural phenomena, it addresses a 7th century mindset, a 15th century mindset, a 21st century mindset. From this perspective, the Quran is four-dimensional, it's timeless, and addresses all different types of thinking across the ages, which indicates that the one who authored this is also beyond physical time. If we have time, we're going to talk about the impact of the Quran, that the Quran from a social, historical, political perspective actually was one of the causes for Western civilization. And this is indicated not by crazy Muslims, right, a mad mufti, but rather by academics, non-Muslim academics. Then, if we have time, as I said, we'll talk about its teachings, and finally we end on a reflecting note. So without further ado, let's talk about the Quran itself. What is the Quran? Now, many people don't know what the Quran is. Now, according to a 9th century scholar of the Quran, his name was Az-Zarqani, he said the following. He said, the Quran is the Arabic speech of God, which he revealed to Muhammad, upon whom be peace, in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the compiled written pages of the Quran and has reached us by recurrent reporting. Recurrent reporting basically means that there was one person who orally recited or said something to a whole group of people. That group of people understood it, memorized it, traveled the world, and recited exactly the same thing to another group of people, and that has gone on continuously. This is why when you go to some North African villages and you walk into a mosque and you ask to read the Quran, they won't give you a Quran. They'll say to a little boy, Ya walad, my son, little boy, go to this man, ask him what he wants. And if you, for example, want to read the 2nd chapter of the Quran, the little boy will just write it out for you because they've all memorized it in their heads. And this is an interesting sociological feature of North African tribes. They have basically learnt the Quran via this oral tradition. And the chains of narration of this oral tradition, they're not all the same. They come from different scholars, different peoples across time and places, but they all reach back to the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, which goes to show that the Quran is preserved. Because to say that what they're reciting is not the Quran is to basically say that there's a mass conspiracy. That somehow all of these people at different points of these chains of narrations conspired together, traveled back in time, had a time machine, right? So the point here is, what we're trying to say is that the Quran is the Arabic speech of God. And the reason it's in Arabic is because Arabic is so rich. It's a mathematical language. I mean, how many words for horse in English? About 2, 3. In Arabic, you have like 100. Even for camel. How many words for camel? 1, right? 1. But in Arabic, you have like loads. And it could mean a baby camel, a pregnant camel, an old camel, a tall camel, a tasty camel, right? Whatever. They have camel meat, by the way, in Arabia. Not that I like camel meat, but anyway, I don't even like meat in the first place. I come from a vegetarian background, you see. So, anyway, that's a different issue. So, that's the reason why the Quran is in Arabic, because it's very concise. It's one of the most concise languages available. And when God uses a particular word for a particular meaning, then we understand what that meaning is. There's no ambiguity. There's not too much ambiguity for us to be confused about what God has said. And this is the kind of wisdom why the Quran is in the Arabic language. As Allah says in the Quran, Arabiyyun mubin, that this book is in clear, pure Arabic. So it continues, the scholar continues, and it was revealed to Muhammad, upon whom be peace, in wording and meaning. So the words are from God and the meaning is from God. And this is very important for us to understand. And as I said, it's been preserved in the written compiled pages of the Quran. We have, for example, after the 1st century of the migration, after Hijri, we have the whole of the Quran preserved in physical format. But we also have, as the scholar says here, preserve the Quran via the oral tradition, the recurrent reporting. So this is essentially the Quran from this perspective. And the Quran, brothers and sisters, makes you think. You see, the Quran is a very unique book. It doesn't reflect the mentality or the philosophy of the 7th century. It's quite timeless, it's quite human, it's quite existential, which means referring to the self. Why am I? Whose am I? For whom am I? And maybe for some of us on a Friday night, where am I? But you're very nice human beings, right? Because you're here early in the morning and you're very studious. So the Quran makes you think. And it engages with the inner dimensions of man, his emotional capacity, his psychological capacity, and his intellect. As the Quran says, وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do we explain our signs, God's signs, in detail for those who reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, which means those who reflect. And by the way, this word means not any type of reflection. It doesn't mean be a desert romantic and you're sitting on the chair touching the sand, looking at the stars, writing poetry to your beloved, and sipping a glass of milk, just to make it Islamic, yeah? That's not the type of reflection the Quran is telling you to do. The type of reflection from a linguistic perspective, if you go to the classical Arabic dictionaries, is that the reflection you're doing, you must inquire about the implications of the thing that you're reflecting upon. This is very key because the Quran doesn't ask you just to reflect like a desert romantic. The Quran asks you to reflect by inquiring about the implications of things. The Quran is a book for thinking people. And this is something that we have to understand because sometimes in the Muslim community, we suspend our critical thinking. And it is no wonder the professor and academic Rosalind Ward Gwynne, on a book about logic and the Quran, she says, reasoning and argument are so integral to the content of the Quran and so inseparable from its structure that they in many ways shape the very consciousness of Quranic scholars. Because we see that the Quran itself, when it was internalized in people's hearts and minds, it basically manifested in this kind of thinking and thought and this new type of civilization. And this is why Professor Shabir Akhtar, in his book The Quran and the Secular Mind, a Philosophy of Islam, published by Routledge, he makes a beautiful point. He basically says that the verses of the Quran that make you think about man, life, and the universe indicate a wisdom. And he really aptly summarizes this in the following way. And listen to what he says. Nature's flawless harmonies and the delights and liabilities of our human environment, with its diverse and delicate relationships, are invested with a religious significance. Created nature is a cryptogram, meaning it's a hidden message. It's the Greek word grifto, hidden. It's a cryptogram of a reality which transcends its nature. Its nature is a text to be deciphered, evidences accumulating in the material and social worlds and in the horizons jointly point towards a hidden immaterial order. Very complex English, but it's beautifully said. And what he's trying to say is that the Quranic verses that get you to think are there to say that there's wisdom in the universe, that there is a purpose. It resonates within everything that exists. We're not just rearrangement of molecules and matter, because if you're just matter, then it doesn't really matter. But we know it does. And when you go to various other academic works published by Brill, which is a famous academic work, you can find it online, it's an encyclopedia on the Quran, on Islam. They basically indicate that the Quranic exegesis, the classical commentaries on the Quran, always spoke about that the Quran indicates that there's a wisdom in the universe, there's a divine order. And that's why God deserves to be worshipped. Not only did He create the universe, He sustains it, and there is wisdom in the universe. So this is how the Quran really engages with the mind and makes you think. But not only this, brothers and sisters, the Quran has an intellectual challenge. Not only does it talk about man, life, and the universe, the big questions about who am I, where am I, whose am I, why am I. Not only does it answer these questions, these existential questions referring to the self, it also poses a challenge. It doesn't say like maybe like other traditions, oh, believe in this book because I said so, right? This kind of circular reasoning, this kind of leap of faith. Like you have to like jump off the cliff and somehow you think you're going to survive. You know, we don't believe in this kind of false intellectual cliffhanger, right? We actually believe that this book is nuanced. This book can address a layman, can address the intellectuals, all types of peoples, and it really engages with the human mind. And the Quran poses an intellectual challenge. In the second chapter, in the 23rd verse, the Quran says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. If you're in doubt, yes, talking about doubt. If you're in doubt about this book we have sent down to our servant, referring to the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, then bring one chapter like it. One chapter. And call in your witnesses and supporters, everybody. The Dawkins of the world, the Hitchens of the world, the professors of the world, the haters of the world, the online trolls of the world. This morning I got so much hate from online trolls, right? All of these people, bring them all together and try and produce something like it. You don't like our worldview, you don't like our moral, ethical worldview. Well, discuss the roots of this worldview. Don't hate, debate. Don't hate, debate. Don't curse, converse. You like it? And that's the whole point. That's what Muslims want to do. That's what the Quran is, an intellectual engaging book from that perspective. Not only this, the Quran says, then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from other than God, they would have found within it ikhtilafan kathir, many discrepancies. Many discrepancies. So you could do two things. Go through the whole book, find out if there's any discrepancies, or you could find out how many times the word ikhtilafan is used. Discrepancies. That form is only used once, which I think is quite interesting. So, this intellectual challenge really evoked thinking in Western and Eastern academics. For example, Bruce Lawrence, who wrote the book The Quran, a biography, on page number 8, he says, Quranic verses as tangible signs are expressive of an inexhaustible truth. They signify meaning, layered within meaning, light upon light, miracle after miracle. You also have Imam Fakhruddin, as cited by As-Suyuti, the famous scholar. He said the Quran is matchless. The Quran is you cannot match this book because of its eloquence, its unique style, and it is free from error. It is no wonder the famous Orientalist and professor Hamilton Gibb, in 1980, in his famous book Islam, a Historical Survey, he said that this Quran came to challenge the Arabs and the whole of mankind, and they failed. And he concludes, if they could not meet the challenge, and it is obvious that they could not, then let them accept the Quran as an outstanding evidential miracle. So from this perspective, brothers and sisters, it's without a doubt that the Quran engages with the mind, engages with the heart, intellectually engages human beings. And we need to basically resonate this in our lives as Muslims, so we become walking Qur'ans, not only from an ethical dimension, but from an intellectual dimension. That we have a very strong book, and not only is it strong intellectually, but we have good reason to believe it's from the divine, which now leads me to the reasons why we believe this book is from the divine. The first main reason I want to talk about is that it's inimitable. It's a big word. All it means is you can't match it, right? It's a fancy word for you can't match this, right? So the Quran is inimitable from the perspective of eloquence and rhetoric. It's a peak of eloquence. It uses the right words in the right order, with the perfect meaning. It's concise. It has the largest number of rhetorical devices and features. What does rhetoric mean in the Arabic tradition? It means language to please and persuade. Now you may think, well, I don't know any Arabic, so I can't resonate with this. This is the point. I'm going to show to you that you don't need to know anything about the Arabic language. You don't need to recognize alif, ba, ta, which is the ABC of Arabic. You don't even need to know how Arabic looks like. Okay? You may even think it looks Chinese. Who cares? It's irrelevant. I'm going to try to articulate an argument that you don't need any knowledge of the Arabic language to really understand that the Quran is actually linguistically miraculous. This is weird, right? You probably think I'm on drugs or like I'm drunk. No, true. Listen to me very carefully. But before I do that, I want to just really paint the right background, intellectual background, and historical background to understand this argument properly. Now, the important background is this. We know the Quran sent down a challenge. Now, this challenge was sent down in the 7th century, where the Arabs in the 7th century were considered as Arabic linguists par excellence. You know, they would love language. Language for them is like being the doctor and the engineer of the world, or being a CEO, or owning an island, right? That's what language meant. And that's why the Arab historian Ibn Rashid, he says the Arabs used to congratulate each other only on the birth of a child, usually a boy, because it was a very patriarchal society, and when a poet rose amongst them, a poet. Because articulating yourself in the Arabic language was like, that's it. You have now become the Don, right? That's it. So there was a socialization, there was a construct in that society to basically say, you know how to articulate yourself in the Arabic language? That's it. You've made it. You've made it. There's nothing higher. You've reached the peak of society. And that's what language was at that time. And the Quran came to challenge those people. And you know what? They were dumbfounded, flabbergasted. They failed to produce anything like the Quranic discourse.